Hey, what's happening, fam? It's your boy, 𝘀𝗍𝗃. I've been trying to, the reason this video's so late in the making is I'm trying to do it when there's daylight outside so that you can see me better and it looks clearer. But unfortunately, my schedule's off this week. That's actually part of the reason this is the point of the video, is to inform you of my problems that I've been dealing with. Mainly just because I feel like in a lot of ways I've done a disservice to myself these past few years because although I generally consider myself an open book, I just haven't been around. I'm very introverted and haven't talked at length about some of the things I'm dealing with. And so typically whenever I do go outside of this house to chill with people or something like that, I do a lot of preparation, like make sure I got a lot of sleep, and I prep myself up nice. And in a lot of ways, like I said, I think that's been a big disservice to myself because a lot of people kind of just see me in those moments and they don't see that when I get home after just 2 hours outside, I'm asleep for like 12. I just totally crashed and wiped out and stuff. First perspective, in preparation for doing some kind of extroverted event, whether it was just, chilling with a close friend of mine or going to some kind of party or like a church small group or something like that, is a week-long event of preparation. And I'll talk more about that. It has to do with the physical reactions to stress, the extreme physical reaction to stress. But it's a big ordeal for me now. It didn't used to be like that. But now it's very difficult. It takes a lot of work to interact with people, Anyway, so I get back to the point. My schedule's off. There's one of the many issues that I have is irregular circadian rhythm syndrome. And basically that just means that because of my extensive fatigue, I'm sleeping a lot longer than most people. I'm not awake as long, so my days are not quite 24 hours. Depending on the season, they can be less or more. And so just the natural circadian rhythm that wakes you up at a certain time and keeps you awake during the day, gets you ready to fall asleep when the sun goes down, that clock in my body is broken. But it's like, 2 a.m. or something. I'm wide awake, if you could say that. But yeah, it needs to get done. I need to talk about my stuff. So I don't really have a plan for this video. I just kind of turned on the camera. I think I'm going to start by just outlining basically my timeline these past few years from the moment that I started realizing I was having issues. In general, I've always been purportedly very healthy. I never had any major issues. When I was really young, in 3rd grade, this is the only major health issue that I had before all of this. When I was in 3rd grade, I had something called scarlet fever, also called rheumatoid fever, I think. Or they're related, I'm not sure. But I was out of school pretty ill with that for like 6 months or so. I was out of school for a month, and then I was just like not right for another 6 months after that. But that's the only thing. I mean, otherwise, throughout my life, I've been pretty healthy, as far as I can tell. basically near the end of high school, I started, everyone in my family could attest to this, but I was growing a little bit more fatigued. I think a lot of us just chalked it up to being stressed. I'm very ambitious. I haven't been these past few years, but in general, I think in my inner self, I'm a very ambitious person. You know, I do a lot of stuff. And so in high school, I was involved with a lot of extracurricular activities. You know, so I ended up being pretty wiped out all the time. My family noticed it was hard to wake me up, darn near impossible at some points. But like I said, I don't think anybody really thought of it as a major issue. I remember in high school, a lot of my high school friends would joke about it. You know, little did they know it was a big thing, just in development. But then I started college, and that was great. I think I exerted myself way more. Believe it or not, between high school and college, I ended up doing a lot more in college, and I really was hardly sleeping, but I didn't have a problem with that. You know, I was eating relatively healthy. You know, there's only so healthy you can eat when you're eating, you know, meal plan food at college. But you know, I was eating a lot. I was exercising a lot. I mean, I rode my bike everywhere. For those of you who live in Denton and know the UNT campus, I was living in Victory, and I would bike across the highway to and from my living quarters every day, multiple times a day. So I was getting more than just, you know, sedentary exercise. I mean, I wasn't like a gym buff, but I was doing something, and I enjoyed it, you know. Basically, when I started realizing there was something wrong was about somewhere at the beginning of the spring semester of my freshman year. It became considerably harder to do that trip, to bike across the highway. I noticed a weird pain in my legs, as if I didn't have the muscles to do that. It started getting worse, and it wasn't like you know, that good pain that you feel whenever you're exercising and you're tearing the muscles correctly and healthily to let them rebuild stronger. You know, it wasn't like that. It was different. It was weird, and I didn't really think much about it. I probably should have thought more about it at the time, been more concerned, but I kind of just, you know, again, I was just, maybe I'm tired, you know, I'm not sleeping well. That's probably a huge factor. So I started taking the bus, you know, and that was that. Then when this really, everything fell apart for me, I guess, was sophomore year. I moved out of Victory. I had moved into an apartment with my best friend Steven, and that was great. I had a lot of fun, but again, you know, the problems just started. They started out small, you know, subtle, nothing really to get worried about in particular, but they started adding up until you know, sometime probably like late November-ish, I got sick with some kind of flu or strep or something. It wasn't flu or strep. I was sick for a day or two, went to the UNT clinic. They did tests for strep and flu, no, all negative. So I just went home, kind of spent a week to recover, sleeping a lot. You know, I was like asleep for like 20 hours a day, you know. The problem was it never really got better. I was sick, and then I was just, that kind of became the norm. I was able to finish out my classes, just barely, man. It was rough. I was absent a lot, and I had to do a lot of makeup work, and all that stress was not helping me. But I finally I pushed on through, made it to the end, Christmas break, a month at home, you know. I figured that would be plenty of opportunity for me to just recover. And, well, then I got back for the spring semester of my sophomore year, same apartment. From what I recall, it's been a while, and you know my memory is foggy, but I think I was doing great. I was ready to tackle, you know, classes and stuff, like I usually am. Except, you know, I was just incredibly exhausted. You know, I would sleep anywhere between 6 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours. And no matter how much sleep I got, I was still just incredibly exhausted. You know, it's not just being tired, it's more than that. You know, it's, you know, there's kind of a chronic pain everywhere and just an inability to kind of move the muscles. You know, they don't respond. You just don't have the energy to move. And all of that, you know, plus emotional, physical stress, probably spiritual stress too, you know. Like I said, my memory is foggy, but I think I was probably turning away from God a lot in those times, a lot more than I usually do. And I think all of that really I fell down the toilet, you know, just a huge spiral, just to like completely unable to function. And you know, all that, I was having suicidal thoughts too. I forgot to mention that, but so there was one night I specifically remember I called my parents, I called my family, and I was just like totally, you know, just destroyed, and I just told them I gotta get out of here. I gotta leave, you know. And so we talked it out that night. They were just, to them, I think they were learning everything at that point. I don't think they were following along with the progression, but you know, we worked out the details. I pulled out of college officially, and I went home. I spent the semester at home, pursuing different doctors. When it came to doctors, and well, the first thing that we suspected as a family as to what my issues were was thyroid issues, hypothyroidism, because my mom and my mom's whole side of the family all deal with issues with the endocrine system, thyroid gland, pituitary gland, things like that. So it seemed pretty obvious to me. I was like, okay, yeah, I have hypothyroidism. I'm about the age where my mom started experiencing symptoms when she had, when she started realizing, this is it. So I had an appointment with my mom's thyroid doctor, and they did the whole workup, you know, blood tests, ultrasound of my thyroid gland. For those of you who don't know, the thyroid gland is a small gland that hides somewhere in your neck right here. It kind of looks like a butterfly. And the thyroid gland is key to producing necessary hormones that you know, give you energy, among, you know, a billion other things, regulating all sorts of different processes in your body. So anyway, they did the blood work, ultrasound, blah, blah, blah. Came back like a week later, met with the doctor, and he's like, you have no thyroid problems whatsoever. Your thyroid gland looks in perfect shape. We tested your levels. All your levels are well within normal ranges. And he said something specifically that, you know, I'm not going to say that you don't have a problem, but you don't have this problem, and I can't help you. So so that was a strikeout, you know. Soon after, because that was kind of like a blow to the, a big blow, because it's like, oh, well, if I don't have hypothyroidism, what the heck is this? We didn't really have a place to start except for my symptoms, which were at that time, quite a lot actually, and not very conclusive. I actually I'm looking through my phone right now. I have on my phone, actually, this phone I got hand-me-down from my mom right about the time that I started having these issues. So one of the first things I have in here ever is a memo called symptoms. And this was the list that I went into a general practitioner. There's a clinic, 20 minutes from my house. I just said, okay, if I don't know where to start, I'll just start with someone who does everything. And so I went into the doctor's office with this list. Major weight gain with no habit change. For those of you who knew me 3 years ago and see me now, I probably look quite different, because not only did I grow a beard and get earrings and change my hair, but I gained a lot of weight, anywhere between 80 to 100 pounds actually. And that actually happened pretty quickly. I haven't been gaining a lot of weight the past couple of years, but I gained a lot of weight really quickly, just out of nowhere. So, yeah. Fatigue, 6, 8, 10, 12, 16 hours, never rested. Always tired but can't fall asleep sometimes. That's something very specific. In my opinion, there's a difference between, wanting to fall asleep, that kind of fatigue, and then just, exhaustion fatigue, where, because I have exhaustion fatigue, one of the other symptoms I'm dealing with is insomnia. I'm feeling super tired, but I can't fall asleep. And so, yeah. Lethargy, muscle stiffness, muscle aching, memory problems, brain fog. My teachers noticed a downfall, actually. You may remember I just mentioned when I got sick with that flu strep thing. I'm not really sure what it was. It was maybe like mono or something, I don't know. And when I got sick with that and I had a bunch of makeup work, I was constantly meeting with my professors and stuff. And they all confirmed with me. They all specifically noted that I was, in those meetings, that my performance was totally different. That, they just saw a total, like, when they're grading like my homework or my papers, or they're seeing my class participation and stuff, they just, it was night and day. Depression, I was dealing with depression. Occasional out-of-breathness and dizziness. That's actually, the out-of-breathness is something called, they call it air hunger. It has to do with somewhat related to like the way your heart behaves, I believe. High blood pressure, I got that from my dad. I'm not really sure if that's related. RLS, at that time, I wasn't officially diagnosed with RLS because I hadn't met with a sleep doctor. Typically it's kind of categorized as a sleep disease or syndrome. RLS stands for restless leg syndrome. Anybody who knows me knows that I do this a lot. Strangers always ask me if I'm nervous, and I never am. But basically, I have a sensation. I call it a pain. The doctors won't call it a pain. It's a pain. There's a pain in my extremities, my arms and my legs. pretty constantly. It's all the time, and the only way that it relieves is when I shake or move my body. You can do some rudimentary research on RLS, and there'll be a bunch of theories as to why that happens. This is a big issue. There's a lot of people that have it. It's more common than you might think. But the most prevailing theory right now is that for some reason there's a disconnect between your brain and the nerve endings in your extremities, and your brain is afraid that your legs or your arms are dying for whatever reason. Your legs are not dying, but it thinks they are, and so as a measure to help prevent death of your extremities, to prevent them from dying, it sends pain signals to get you to move, or some sort of sensation to get you to move, to make you uncomfortable. And so I feel that all the time. I'm always moving my legs, and that makes, my muscles hurt more, but whatever. I did get officially diagnosed with that when I met with the sleep doctor just a couple of months ago. They did a sleep study, noticed my legs were moving during sleep, as well as confirming that I do have the issue during the day as well, and I officially got diagnosed with RLS. The thing with RLS, restless leg syndrome, I have a lot of syndromes. Oh, gosh, that was the worst. A syndrome is a disease or a grouping of common symptoms between individuals. The doctors don't know where it's coming from, why it's happening, or how to fix it. And so those kind of diseases get categorized as syndromes. And, so that was the list that I came into first with my GP. So they ran a full blood work of like all sorts of stuff. They did EKG testing. That's where they measure. They measure my heart rate, and they look at my heart from all different electrodes that they place around my body to determine how my heart is functioning. Blah blah blah. I get back like a week later with the results, and there's a myriad of problems that they can see. There's like my red blood cell count was abnormally low. A myriad of hormones, except the thyroid, believe it or not, were kind of on the lower side, still normal, still acceptable ranges, but on the lower side. Like my vitamin D was low, my calcium was high, just kind of weird things, nothing crazy, nothing to get scared about. But the one thing that the GP saw that was very low was testosterone. And she suspected that I had something called hypogonadism, which is a disease where for some reason your testes aren't producing testosterone correctly or at all. And the reason why is because my level of testosterone was somewhat, I think it was like 90 nanograms of testosterone per deciliter of blood. That's how they measure it, which is significantly low. I'm supposed to have anywhere between 800 and 1300, and I had 90. So the doctor told me specifically that I have just about as much testosterone in my system as a 90-year-old man would have. So I was like, okay. So that's where she started. That's where those doctors wanted to start. And so the next thing that I did was for a period of 2 or 3 months, I believe, I directly injected testosterone supplements via needle. I would be given vials of pure testosterone, and I would take a needle once a week to my thigh and just inject the serum. And after that period of time, we came back. I did blood work again to see where my testosterone levels were. They hadn't changed a bit. Didn't go anywhere. So for some reason, my body was not accepting the new testosterone, which implies that there's a deeper issue, and that hypogonadism isn't the end of the problem for me. That's kind of a common theme with this journey. I get diagnosed with a lot of things over the years, but they're all symptomatic diseases, secondary stuff. They're not the root problem. So, I was done with her because she wasn't looking anywhere else. So we moved on. I'm trying to remember what we did next. Okay, at this time, I had spent the summer working a job in more downtown Houston, Cypress area, and my friend 𝘀𝘀𝗽𝗃 hit me up to collaborate on a project with him and his band, UFO Funk Band. And at that time, I think I made a poor decision, but I was feeling good. I had been working. I'd been able to manage my symptoms. I believe get a hold of managing my symptoms. I wasn't able to function normally. I was needing to sleep a lot more than the normal person, and I was exhausted. I couldn't do a lot without being totally stressed out. But I kind of I justified in my head a way to come back to school part-time, taking the minimum amount of classes I needed, and making sure to stay home and get rest and not overexert myself. And so I went to college. After being away for one semester, I went back with this plan to make this album, which was later called Response, and really is kind of the last, musical thing I did. So I came back, did that album, was taking maybe 4 classes, not even music classes, just kind of like basic stuff, easy stuff supposedly. And I spent that semester, and by the end of it, I had, a couple of months in, I had just fallen apart again. Even after totally diminishing the amount of stress intake I was experiencing, I was enjoying community, and then, with a small home church that I was doing in my apartment with some of my closest friends at the time, and I was spending a lot of time sleeping, just relaxing, getting my work done while chilling at home, not going out anywhere, not doing crazy stuff. The only big stressful thing was this album and just the basic school that I was doing. And even that, like I said, I think I made a poor decision because, I just totally fell apart, even worse than before. By the last month or so of the semester, I had not attended a single class, and I had to pull out. I have to withdraw from every single one of my classes. Some failed me, some didn't, and it was a bad thing. And so I got back, and I was like, okay, this problem is bigger, than I imagined at first. And I've already tried and failed. I can't resume life, until I fix these issues. And so I've been home ever since. I haven't returned to UNT. It's been it's been 2 years at least now. 2 years since I was last in college, and I was so darn close, man. I came into college with a lot of credits from testing that I did before school, a lot of credits from my AP classes that transferred from high school. I came in with about 30 credit hours, and I only have like 30 credit hours left, just a good 2 semesters, 1 year, to finish with a double major nonetheless, and a minor in French. Yeah, but that's not a thing anymore. I could go back, if the treatment that I'm on right now works. But anyway, while the one positive thing that occurred when I did pull out of school the second time now, this is the second time I dropped out of college now, I came home and, my whole family and I realized, okay, we need to attack this with a fervor. And my mom had a mutual friend of hers from her college. She's attending a seminary here in Houston. His wife is a practicing doctor of something called functional medicine. And so we went to her. And at this time, I was experiencing major depression and extreme frustration, I was very cynical. I still am cynical about it, but, every appointment that I had with her, I was just, the prevailing thought in my head was, there's something horribly wrong with me that nobody knows how to fix, and she's not going to have the answer either. And she didn't. She ended up not having the answer either. But I quickly learned that, that kind of thinking is not conducive to healing. And it's not conducive to hope and the way that God functions. So that led to all sorts of death in my mind and stuff. But anyway, I'm kind of going all over the place. So anyway, got back working with this functional medicine doctor, and she was able to tell me some very poignant things about my DNA and about my health that were very helpful, if only just mentally, to start getting a grasp on the things that I was dealing with. So the way that we worked with her, I submitted my DNA to a lab via a saliva sample, and they returned a whole. I have a huge, a book, pretty much, on my computer right now of my DNA and every little bit of numerical data that is involved with that. Very, very scientific. I don't know how to read it at all, but anyway. So she examined my results, and we came back, and she told me a lot of, things about my body that I didn't know, that helped to explain why I was having issues, but not the full problem. She suspected that I had something called, and there's not an official name for this, but it's a problem in your cells where your mitochondria, if you remember high school biology, the mitochondria in your cells, which effectively are the trash compactors, what they do is they take the gunk out of the microscopic stuff in your body and are supposed to filter it. That's my rudimentary knowledge of mitochondria. But the mitochondria in my body weren't functioning properly, and there's a process called methylation that my body was not doing that it needed to be doing. And so with that, she put me on dozens of individual supplements that were supposed to, they're natural vitamins, minerals, and other kinds of supplements, nothing pharmaceutical, to kind of help my body recover from its from the stuff that was depleted and yeah. So we did that for 6 months. I was taking about 30 pills in the morning, 30 pills at night. I hated those things, man. They had a horrible taste. And here's the funny thing. It may have just been psychosomatic, but about a year before I met with her, I had stopped being able to taste and to smell. And to this day, you know, I can't smell anything. I can't taste anything. But I could taste and I could smell those dang drugs, man. Like I said, it could have just been psychosomatic, but there were many times where I threw up, you know, after taking them. Even when, you know, eating food and, you know, taking them at a certain time of the day, man, taking them slowly over time, you know, didn't work. But so like I said, anyway, she mentioned in my DNA, because of the failure of my mitochondria, basically when we experience stress, our brains, they emit a myriad of chemicals like epinephrine into your body that help kind of induce a physical state that can help you deal with that stress. And over time, the cells in your body are supposed to break down those chemicals so that they're no longer in your system. And that essentially is whenever you start to feel calm again, after the stress has been relieved, you know, when you move on from a stressful event and things return back to normal and you feel good, or you feel relieved, or you feel comfortable. She basically told me that the mitochondria in my cells weren't doing that at all and stopped being able to do that. And so any amount of stress that I would experience, my brain would emit the chemicals throughout my blood, and none of those chemicals were being broken down, so the stress would never relieve. And once she said that, like, something huge clicked in my brain, because that's exactly one of the things that I was feeling. Any amount of mental stress just totally put me down in the worst place, and it would like never go away. It only got worse, and things would pile up. Even when there was no reason to be stressed about anything anymore, you know, say I had a test, you know, get a little bit stressed about the test, complete the test, got the grade, you know, move on, like I normally did. Well, that feeling of being stressed never went away, even, you know, months after the test was over. And, you know, things just piled up and add to my issues, you know. So that was another failure, in a sense. You know, failure is a strong word, you know, because I am learning a lot throughout this process. I'm being diagnosed with a lot of symptomatic diseases and issues. But nothing has worked, you know. I've tried all sorts of different treatments, and nothing is resolving even just one or two of my symptoms. My symptoms are the same, and some are growing worse and worse. So she was the 5th or 6th doctor that I had been to in the past year and a half, and nothing was working. So yeah, believe it or not, I actually tried going back to school a 3rd time, not to UNT, but to seminary school in Houston, online, just taking one class at a time. And after 2 semesters of that, I had to pull out again, you know. It was too much still. So, if I were to summarize the entirety of my symptoms at this point in time, I would say brain fog. That's a huge one, you know. The thing about fatigue and being tired and having a disease or symptoms of that, it's not just being tired, like waking up feeling a little groggy, not being able to exert yourself as much before you crash. At the end of the day, it's not like that. It's the stuff that goes along with it that makes it really hard, Like I would say, with that, I had depression, a lot of depression. And that's been one of the bigger battles that I've experienced these past 2 years, to the point where about April timeframe of 2016, I actually attempted suicide. And obviously that didn't go through because I'm here. But it got pretty bad, And eventually pulled out of that, and seminary actually had a lot to do with that. Reintegrating back into God's Word, even amidst everything that I was dealing with. Found a lot of hope in eschatology. And even to this day, it's one of my favorite topics. I get very passionate about it. Just because, I had believed, I still believe to this day that, in a way, Western Christianity, modern Christianity, especially where I grew up, is being cheated out of that truth, in a sense, because we don't talk about it. Because we have their perception that it's very complex and it's very complicated and unnecessary. Maybe you don't need to know about eschatology. You don't need to know about the end times to be a good Christian here and now. To be a good Christ follower and love God here and now. And where that is true to an extent, there are plenty of wonderful, obedient Christ followers that truly do love God and exemplify His glory day to day without knowing a lick about end times, about anything in Revelation or Daniel or anything, or Isaiah or anything like that. I really don't think that's Jesus's perspective. Throughout the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, He's constantly teaching about the end times. It's one of the most prominent themes and features in the Gospels, believe it or not. And the reason why is because it's a very legitimate thing. I think a lot of us, I don't want to get into a preaching thing, but but this is important to my health. This is important to my journey. This understanding, and this what I've learned here. I'll just be quick with it, but for now, I think one of the biggest problems that a lot of the people I know, a lot of the brothers and sisters in Christ that I interact with, is that the kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven that's talked about throughout the scriptures, that we know those scriptures by heart. We hear them all the time. It's common phrase. It's Christianese. It's churchese. But I don't think that we actually see it as a legitimate kingdom, like a city of the New Jerusalem that is going to descend on the earth soon. And we're going to live and rule with Christ through earth from that city made of real material, tangible, for 1,000 years, I found a lot of hope in that, learning about all of that, the Bema seat, rewards, losses, the New Jerusalem, the millennial reign, the end times, the apocalypse, the eternal state. All of these things, they gave me a lot of hope. And I think they are what really pulled me out of depression. Anyway, I've severely gone off track here, but yeah. So my symptoms: fatigue, exhaustion, muscle and joint pain, chronic pain, just constantly, weight gain, which has led to all sorts of problems, brain fog, that's a huge one, depression. Yeah. I can't remember them all. I should write a huge exhaustive list one day, but anyway, we're coming near to the end of the journey, in a sense, or at least to where we are now, like today. So a couple of months ago, I went to a sleep doctor. It's something that I'd been meaning to do for a long time, but for different reasons, because of insurance and stuff, we were putting it off to pursue other avenues. Finally, we just did it. I went in to the sleep doctor, did a sleep study, came back. After a week, they had looked over the results, and they confirmed I had something called severe obstructive sleep apnea, 𝘲𝗲𝗱𝗆. And essentially, there's a lot of misconceptions about sleep apnea. A lot of people think the most common individuals, victims of sleep apnea, are like fat old white men. And to where that is technically true, that is a lot of the demographic. It's a lot more common in young people than you'd think. And it's not always by snoring. I don't snore a bit. You can ask anybody that I've bunked with or roomed with, snoring typically isn't an issue with me. But around 30 times an hour at night, naturally, I stop breathing for whatever reason. They can be full obstructions, just stop breathing completely, or they can be more common partial obstructions where there's a big blockage for some reason in my system, my airway, that I'm hardly getting any air. And so, so about 30 times an hour every night, I stop being able to breathe to some degree. And with that, anytime you stop being able to breathe correctly, there is brain arousals. Your brain is trying to shut down, going to different stages of sleep. There are 4 different stages of sleep, naturally. Stage 1, 2, 3, and then stage 4, or stage R sleep. And stages 3 and 4 are the stages that where your body restores, your immune system restores, your endocrine system replenishes, all that kind of stuff. In the sleep study, I'm not breathing. My brain reacts. It's being woken up. I'm not waking up consciously, but it's being aroused, and I'm switching between stages 1 and 2 without moving into the deeper stages of sleep. And so they believe that for the past few years, my sleep, my air has been obstructed, my breathing has been obstructed to the point consistently to where I am not reaching those rejuvenating stages of sleep, and I haven't been. So for years I've been sleeping without sleeping. I've been basically going into sort of like a comatose stage where I'm not actually recovering. My sleep is useless. And that's why I'm waking up just tired. I'm never resting, never getting rest. Always exhausted and just never being able to sleep, And so that diagnosis was very helpful. I got onto a CPAP machine, which looks like this. And basically what a CPAP machine, it stands for constant pressure applying something, I don't know. Basically what it's doing is it's force feeding air at a very high pressure into my nostrils, into my airway, so that even for whatever reason why I'm having obstruction, air is making its way through and I'm getting that breath. They believe it's just genetic. As I hit puberty and started to develop, my airway just, for some reason, my nasal cavity is too small, and that in combination with my jaw is too far back, a bunch of different reasons why my airway is closed, but so that was very helpful. And I also got officially diagnosed with RLS at that time. This was about 2 months ago. So I've been on the CPAP machine for a few weeks now, but it has not yielded any success yet. They say give it 4 weeks. It's almost been 4 weeks, but it hasn't been helpful. It hasn't relieved my symptoms in the slightest. In fact, the first week on the CPAP machine was terrible. I didn't sleep at all. It was very uncomfortable in a way. Anyway, and that comes to the most recent diagnosis. When the CPAP machine wasn't working, my dad had met someone in his church group, something like that, mutual connections. A friend was diagnosed with Lyme disease soon after being diagnosed with sleep apnea, because the sleep apnea thing wasn't working, something like that. So we contacted this doctor. She's in Florida. She used to be Houston, moved out to Florida. We contacted her, had a phone call. She asked for some saliva samples. We sent them in. A couple of days later, we got the phone call, and she ran through this whole list of every problem that she could see, and multiple Lyme disease co-infections were one of them, one of the things that I was having. So here's actually the email that I got from her, accounting all of the problems that she found. Low in manganese, I don't really know what that means, or what that translates to. Mycoplasma present, which is a form of Lyme co-infection. So Lyme co-infection, Lyme disease is a tick-borne illness. This, like I said in a Facebook post recently, she believes that, or we believe as a family as well, that the Lyme disease I contracted when I was an infant. Me and my family, when I was like 2 years old or something like that, we visited Utah for a winter, and my mom noticed I had a tick bite. I don't actually know. I think it was somewhere on my head. And they got it off quickly, but I never presented with any sort of symptoms or rash. They were watching me closely. No issues. That's the only time in my life I've ever knowingly been bit by a tick. And so that's what we believe is the contraction point. But like I said, I didn't present any symptoms. That's actually a lot more common than you'd think. You can be bit by a tick, contract Lyme, and you never know until you start presenting symptoms later in life, if you do. And so, anyway, a Lyme co-infection, basically it's a disease. Bacteria is transferred from the tick into your bloodstream, and also different forms of bacteria, different kinds of bacteria usually come with the Lyme bacteria. And so those are called co-infections because they're infections of other diseases that happen in cooperation at the same time with the main one. And so basically I've got a lot of little bugs running around in my blood. That's fun. I have a vertebral misalignment of thoracic 5, so my spine's off. Borrelia is a bacteria present. That's another Lyme disease co-infection. Parasympathetic disturbance in my endocrine system. I have an allergen sensitivity to grass pollen. I did not know, but I'm allergic to grass pollen. I have subclinical thyroid disturbance, which means that my thyroid level, the levels of my thyroid hormones are a little bit lower than average. Bartonella is another Lyme co-infection that's present in my blood. Low in potassium. I'm having sleep disturbance. Melatonin is not producing itself in my brain to help me fall asleep, which is why I'm having insomnia. Protozoa, myxozoa, that's another Lyme co-infection. Apparently my liver is horrible. It needs complete detoxing. It's very acidic and poisonous right now. I have no idea why that's happening. I'm going to skip over these because I don't know what they are. My pH imbalance is very acidic. Actually, if you guys are doctors or nurses, you can help me figure this stuff out, because I've been researching a huge list. I'm still on the list that I got from the functional medicine doctor a year and a half ago with, a billion different things. I'm still learning about all that stuff. So if you can help me understand what are some of these things I'm talking about, I'd greatly appreciate it. Fungal signature, I've got penicillium commune in my blood. Again, neurological imbalance. I have high epinephrine levels, which goes with the whole stress thing I was talking about earlier. Mycotoxins, 𝘲𝗂𝗽𝗃𝗃. I don't know what that is. Babesia is another Lyme co-infection. Circulatory disturbance, electromagnetic disturbance. Oh, she tested my biological age. Doctors have a way of, basically you have a chronological age, which is how long you've been alive, and then you have a biological age, which is what age your body presents your chronological age to be. Basically how old your body is in comparison to how old you actually are. And she says that I am 14 years older than I am chronologically. So I'm in my late 30s almost. I'm almost a 40-year-old. My body's almost a 40-year-old. That's fun. Super low in testosterone. I already knew about that. Cell salt imbalance, 𝘀𝗲𝗱𝗀. I have a meridian disturbance, pericardium. I think that has to do with my irregular circadian rhythm. And bioavailability disruption and energy balance. Yeah, this is going to be a long video. So, hope you're in for a ride. And so that's that. That's the most recent diagnosis I've had. It's the most promising because, thank God, it's not another syndrome. That's been the worst part for me, I think, emotionally, is that for years I've been having major problems, but I haven't been able to really confirm any of it to most people. And so I've had a lot of fighting with my professors about having to withdraw for severe medical issues. I even had problems with the disability office at UNT to fight for me because the problems I were having I couldn't confirm, and they weren't official. I think, like I said, I've done a disservice to myself in the way that I've presented myself to strangers and friends because, I say I have issues, but the only time they see me is I've done a lot of preparation so that I look normal and healthy in the hour that I'm with them. And when in fact, I get home and I feel like a truck's run over me. But like I said, I'm so glad because for years I've just been tagged on with diagnosis of syndrome, which are all just kind of... Chronic fatigue syndrome was actually the biggest one that I was diagnosed with the functional medicine doctor a couple of years ago. And literally, chronic fatigue syndrome, just up until a decade or two ago, was considered whoopee flu because it was, or yuppie flu, something like that. Yuppie flu, because of how people just believed that it was, psychological instead of clinical. And so yeah, for years I've had a million diagnoses. I feel like a hypochondriac, And I've had so many times that I've like legitimately had fears and doubts as to whether or not I was like making up my problems, you know, because I didn't have any legitimate diagnosis for anything, and nobody could tell me what was wrong. It didn't really seem like anything was wrong. You know, there were a few times where it's like, okay, yeah, you're a little low in testosterone, or your thyroid's maybe a little off, but you just need to eat better. You know, you need to exercise more. You need to stop being lazy. You just need to, like, you know, set your alarm and get up. That's what the sleep doctor told me 2 months ago, and that was so frustrating. But yeah, I'm so glad, you know. When the doctor told me I had Lyme's, it wasn't a sad moment. It was a very happy one, ironically, perhaps. Just because for years, you know, I have been, you know, sitting in the dark about what was going on, and not really being able to interact with anybody without getting, you know, kind of funky stares, or people just kind of dismissing, and then having super doubts of my own, just like, am I just making all this up? You know, how horrible am I if I've just been living the past 2 years just like being lazy, you know, when I could have just got up from my butt and, like, you know, did something to fix it, when in fact I have been having a major issue. So when she said I had Lyme, I was like, okay, God, thank God I'm not making this up. I have a serious issue, and now I can tell people I have Lyme, you know, and it's not like, you know, it's really sad. I think that, you know, we live in an age, medical age, where, you know, people are dismissed, you know, for having severe symptoms, but they don't have a significant diagnosis, you know, because everything that I've been experiencing, none of it's been life-threatening, you know, but it is severely lifestyle-threatening, you know. It's totally wrecked my everything, and I haven't been able to function or live, haven't been able to maintain friendships or work or school or move forward in life whatsoever. Been having crippling depression and fatigue, and you know, I mentioned earlier, Response was really the last musical thing that I did. I've been trying so hard to make music, which is the one thing that I like love most, and I can't even get myself to make music for more than an hour without just like getting depressed and walking away, or just like not having the energy. But yeah. So that's where I am now. I'm kind of at the end of my spiel, I think. Sorry for the long video, and thank you for everybody who's stuck around just to hear my issues. You know, it's good for me. It's therapeutic, I think, to some degree, to talk about it, even if it's just, you know, for a camera. But if you guys, I mean, please don't shy away from talking, you know, comment below, you know, hit me up on the phone if you've got my number. Talk to me, you know, if you want to talk, I'll talk. I'm really hoping and praying that this is, you know, the beginning of the end for this phase of my life, you know. I'm very much ready to move on and start thriving, or to die, actually, you know. Not in a morbid way or a sad, depressing way, you know. I think a lot of ways dealing with this stuff has helped prepare me for death, because, you know, death for a believer, for me, who I believe that that we are eternal, that our souls exist, and that death is not the end for anybody. You know, that I will be free from the symptoms, you know, that I'm experiencing now. And so, in a lot of ways, I've craved for death. I've craved for death when I was depressed, you know, because I wanted to escape. And even now, even though I'm not dealing with major depression, I crave for death just because, I realize to a further extent, the damage that has been done to this world, and the further understanding the consequence of the fall, And I'm really ready for it to be over. Really ready for the millennial kingdom. I'm really ready to get a new glorified body that doesn't have these issues. To start, communicating with God on a physical realm and not being separated by this, distance, between planes, the spiritual planes. So that'll be nice. Anyway, I'll go ahead and cut the video here. Thanks for listening. Yeah, if you pray, I'd love if you'd pray for me, because as much as I'd like to believe that it's over, it's not over yet. And, I have no idea what's going on. Lyme disease, unfortunately, it could just be another symptomatic disease, We're hoping it's not. We're hoping that this is the root, but you never know until you get there. So